Hello and welcome to the European Report. Here we are in the European Parliament, and in today's programme we're going to be discussing the future of EU-Israeli relations as we have our very special guest for the programme. He's Israel's ambassador to the European Union. And my guest today is His Excellency Roni Leshno-Yaar, Israel's new ambassador to the EU and also NATO. I'm also joined by Tomas Sandell, founder and director of the European Coalition for Israel, and Finnish MEP Hannu Takkula. So welcome to the programme. Firstly, I'll start off with you, can I, Roni? And just want to say that it's such an honour and such a privilege to have Israel's ambassador to the European Union on this edition of the European Report, and congratulations on your new appointment and also your new appointment as being Israel's first ambassador to NATO. Can you tell us what that role involves, being Israel's new ambassador to NATO?
Well, good morning. First, thank you again for having me in the show. I appreciate your program and your support for Israel. Tomas is a good friend, and we've been working in the last several years promoting Israel at the United Nations in New York and elsewhere. And I appreciate, Tomas, your friendship and your organization. And I just met the member of parliament, and I'm sure that we are going to be good friends in the near future. This is the first TV show that I participate with, so I also, again, thank you for this opportunity to speak about Israel and Europe. Yes, I am the first accredited Israeli ambassador to NATO. We had relations with NATO in the past. Now we have formalized the relationship. I presented credentials to the Secretary General of NATO. We will open an office in NATO soon, and we will encourage more Israeli military and defense officials to engage with NATO officials and programs. It gives Israel an opportunity to learn more from NATO, but also to share from our experience with NATO. Israel is surrounded by bad countries and bad people. And because we had no choice, we had to spend a lot in our defense and security. We gained experience, which we believe is relevant also to other parts of the world, including Europe, certainly in the current context of European security, on counterterrorism, cyber, etc. And we are more than willing to share this experience with friendly countries and nations, and NATO is such a case.
Absolutely. We could face the day when actually Europe actually needs Israel and Israeli security.
Yeah, it's partnership. We need you, you need us, and we'll work together.
Fantastic, fantastic. It's great to have you on the programme. Thomas, as the time that we're recording this programme, where the news has come off from the other side of the Atlantic that Donald Trump has won the US presidential election against all odds, essentially, against the opinion polls and against many of the political and social commentators. What was your response to Donald Trump's victory?
Well, I think it's simple. The people have spoken, the American people have spoken, and in a democracy, this is what elections are all about, and we'll have to accept it. Of course, we have just woken up to this news, so I think for none of us really have the correct assessment what are the ramifications, say, for US-Israeli relations, US-European relations. But I always said all along that I believe that Donald Trump will find the right and the reasonable people to surround him with and to nominate a new government. And from what I understand, already his first speech was very conciliatory and anything that we heard in the past. So I choose to be optimistic, and I'll have the privilege in January to join the American National Prayer Breakfast, where Donald Trump, of course, will make his first public appearance after having been inaugurated. So that will be a bit of history.
Absolutely. And Hannu, you're one of the very few European MEPs in this parliament that is actually rejoicing at a Trump victory.
Not really. I think it's a question mark for all of us, but of course it's a democracy, and Donald Trump won, and we appreciate that, and we accept that. And of course it seems to me that in Europe, we have a little bit different mental or different way of thinking, and I think that we don't know what is the Donald Trump, what he really is, and that might be the biggest question mark. So for me, I didn't have any side, even though that I'm pro Republicans usually, but I just think that that's the hand of the American people, and that's it. They voted, and that's the result. So we appreciate that.
Absolutely. Roni, I have to ask you about the shocking vote in United Nations regarding UNESCO and UNESCO's vote on the status of Jerusalem that's denying the cultural, political and historical ties between the Western Wall and the Temple Mount to the Jewish people in Jerusalem.
Sure, it shows how bizarre the UN can sometimes become, and we try to separate between the good things that the UN can do for humanity and the politics of the UN, which is ugly and often out of touch with reality. What counts is history that you cannot change or fabricate, and what Israel is doing on the ground. And Israel on the ground is respecting the rights of all faiths in Jerusalem, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, freedom of worship in holy sites to all faiths, freedom of pilgrim. So this or that resolution will not make any difference, but will only increase the determination of Israel and its friends to fight for Jerusalem, for freedom of Jerusalem, and for not allowing anybody to distort or change history.
Absolutely, and we're with you on that one. You have our complete support. And Tomas, I mean, you had the foresight months ago to realise that this UNESCO vote on Jerusalem was coming up, and I think you warned, we did a programme on the last programme, warning our viewers about the dangers of this UNESCO vote, particularly for Israel. In light of this vote, why are we seeing such silence from the Christian church throughout the Western world regarding the changing status of the Western Wall and the Temple Mount?
Well, first of all, in case I had prior knowledge, it's actually due to our good relation and working relationship with Ambassador Leshno-Yaar. You were actually the first one to point this out in your office in Jerusalem. And ever since, we've been keeping an eye on this vote, and we saw it coming. Let me go back a little bit to what happened in London last week to answer your question. On Tuesday, the 1st of October, in the evening, we had an event in the House of Lords with Dr. Jacques Gauthier, who was speaking about the Balfour Declaration. And the Balfour Declaration, it's important, and especially how it was later incorporated into international law, is important because it confirmed the Jewish links and relations with Jerusalem spanning 3,000 years, religious, cultural, historical, which completely contradict the UNESCO resolution. So we already have a decision binding in international law to say this is the case. And obviously, as the ambassador says, historical facts is not something that we can choose to ignore. There is only one date for the Battle of Waterloo. There are not 2-3 different dates depending on what political convictions we have.
Absolutely.
But of course, it is a disgrace that the large Christian organizations did not use this opportunity to, for once, stand on the side of justice. And perhaps what we can note is the statement from the Pope, which came after the vote, but still, if you interpret it in the right way, it's an affirmation of the connection between the Jewish people and the Holy Land, Israel. And I think we should take note of this as a positive sign coming out of the Vatican, but as mainly Protestants, we have to pressure our political bodies to be just as clear on this issue.
Absolutely. And Hannu, we've witnessed with this UNESCO vote on Jerusalem that has been hijacked by Arab states with an ugly political agenda to delegitimize the Jewish state of Israel. Is there anything that this European Parliament can do in giving, say, support for Israel's claims, historical, cultural and political claims to the Western Wall and the Temple Mount in Jerusalem?
Of course, I think that we already started to prepare some kind of statement concerning that, and we have to react. And what's worrying me a lot is that it seems to me that politicians don't know the history anymore. And you know, if politicians not know the history, so how to build the future? And I think it's a basic thing when Israel started to take look after these Temple Mountains. They allowed all big religions go there. It was they said that it's a holy place for the Muslim, Jewish, and Christians, and it was open for all religion group. And I think that we have to know the history that, of course, mainly it's a holy place for the Jewish people, the Temple Mountain, and then it's also the third holiest place for the Muslims after Mecca and Medina, and also the Christians. It's a holy place for us linked to Judaism and also the Christianity. So I'm worried about that. What's going to happen in the future if politicians don't know the history? And it seems to me that we live in so-called post-facts period, or post-fact democracy at the moment, and hope that we can do also something for that, because that kind of basic things, what have happened in the history, it has to be the knowledge for all politicians.
Absolutely. We're now moving on to talk about Israel's relationship with the European Union. I have to ask you, Roni, how would you describe the state of relations currently between Israel and the European Union? Because it's been a bit of a conflicting relationship. On the one hand, we have the 2020, which is a great development in terms of greater cooperation between Israeli and European scientists and others in actually breaking through in medical research and other issues. But we also have the EU's published the EU guidelines. It's effectively called for the labelling of Israeli goods and produce produced in Judea and Samaria, East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights. Plus, we've seen that the European Union has been funding Palestinian homes and villages in Area C, which is an Israeli-controlled area of Judea and Samaria. And we've also then had Mogherini come out this week and actually say that she doesn't think there's anything wrong with the BDS movement because this is part of freedom of expression. But she herself says that the EU does not support the BDS, but they're able to carry on their activities here in Europe. What's your response to all of that?
So first, let's focus on what is the base for the relationship.
Absolutely.
We Israelis, many of us, our parents, grandparents, came from Europe to Israel as immigrants or refugees. My parents came to Israel from Europe in the late 40s, from 2 European countries. When you look at the values, I think that we share the same values as European nations. Israel has been integrating in European programs for several decades now, not only in science and technology and trade, but also in issues such as sports and music. We are part of Europe. Yes, we want to be part of Europe, not part of the Middle East. Although some insist that we should integrate in the Middle East. No. We don't want to be Middle Easterners. We want to become Europeans. Now, the relations are good. They can be even better. And that's my job here in Brussels. And I'm trying to see the big picture, not only the problems, and there are problems, but also the opportunities and the good things about the relationship. And there are many good things about the relationship. Trade is one example. Tourism is another example. Technology is another example. 60 European companies opened in recent years R&D centers in Israel, which is amazing. Israeli scientists and researchers are taking significant part in European programs. By the way, recently Israel became a partner in Creative Europe, which is a fantastic arts and culture European program, and now Israelis can participate in such programs, which is excellent. Then we have our disagreements. My responsibility as ambassador is to develop and promote the relations while continue to discuss in a mature and civilized way with my European partners the disagreements. And we will continue to discuss it. Now, I don't think that European governments, European institutions support BDS. And yes, I'm aware of what happened with the BDS response a few days ago, but the EU ambassador in Israel publicly corrected the wrong image that could have been received by reading that response to a question by Madam Mogherini, and the correction was good. Europe, Brussels is against BDS. And we have to be mindful of the red line that separates between freedom of expression and incitement, anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism. And BDS is not about freedom of expression. It's about denying the legitimacy of Israel. This is not freedom of expression, and I believe and I know that Europe will fight against it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Tomas, I want to bring you in because if we look at this summer, for example, we've had a wave of Islamist terrorist attacks across Europe, particularly in France and also in Germany, and also here in Brussels in March. And now it's a sense, particularly for French citizens, that they are now beginning to feel what Israelis have been going through for decades. Do you think that were able to help build bridges between Israel and Europe, this shared understanding that Israel and Europe face the same threats, particularly coming from Islamic extremists, such as ISIS?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let's first reiterate what I believe I said before on this program. The first thing that any government will do when terror strikes in their country is they pick up the phone and they call Jerusalem. This was again confirmed a few weeks ago here in the Parliament when the Belgian Interior Minister spoke on a panel, and he explained that they had to send Israeli experts here to start learning how you protect an airport, international airport. And if you go to Zaventem now, the airport here in Brussels, you see it reminds us a lot about Tel Aviv and Ben Gurion. So. The problem is, and I think he even said it, or at least he hinted at it, this is not anything they say publicly. So, and I think here our elected leaders could be more open in expressing their appreciation for what Israeli know-how and the Israeli government is willing to do to protect civilian lives in Europe. It is happening, and everyone with some knowledge or decision-making power in this arena know that this is a fact. But the citizens, by and large, they're not aware of it. So I believe there is an information deficit here, and this is something we need to correct. And by doing so, I also think it will strengthen the relations between Europe and Israel, and it will give more appreciation for the kind of situation that Israel lives under every day and has done basically from day one.
Absolutely. And Hannu, I just want to mention a very important resolution that the European Parliament has passed entitled EU Strategy Towards Iran after the nuclear agreement, and I'll just read this out now. This has included condemnation of Iran's calls to destroy Israel and its denial of the Holocaust. The amendment was supported by 590 in favour, 67 against, and 36 abstentions. Doesn't this show that the European Parliament is giving moral clarity and leadership in dealing with the threats posed by the Islamic Republic of Iran to Israel and also to the rest of the Middle East?
Yeah, it's true that Iran resolution was voted in Strasbourg plenary, and I'm very glad that majority of the members of the European Parliament were willing to support Israel and stand outlined with Prime Minister Netanyahu. So this decision was a positive one, and we can be happy about that. And I can hope that this will not be the last one or the only positive resolution about Israel. And when Ambassador already mentioned the trade, I'm the member of the International Trade Committee, and I'm looking for also some positive news in that field, and we have to work for that also. But I'm very happy. That was the good sign for the European Parliament, that it was very, very clearly they condemned this Iran's behavior against the Israel, and I hope that that can be the new start.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have to ask you, Roni, what was your response to dealing with the European Commission? Because when we look at the European Commission, particularly when it comes to Israel, Israel singled out more than any other Middle Eastern country. They look at the whole issue to do with settlements and so-called, and claim that Israel is an obstacle to kind of peace in the Middle East and also relations with the Islamic world. As ambassador, how are you able to convince the European Union to look beyond the conflict and actually see the benefits that Israel has to offer Europe and the European Union?
It was difficult in the past. It's less difficult today. And the reason has been implied in your question, because the Muslim world is interested in relations with Israel. We have many new friends in the region that see Israel as an ally, and they identify other powers in the region as their primary adversaries. And we share that with those Arab countries. Some of it is in the open, much of it is not in the open. But I have to say that Israel, the Jewish people, we have many friends in Brussels, in the institutions, certainly in European government. And instead of whining about those who are not my friends, I will focus and cultivate those who are my friends.
Excellent. That's a good strategy. And also I want to bring you on board on this one, Tomas. What role can Christians play, particularly ECI, in supporting Israel and the Jewish people in Europe?
I think as Christians we have a responsibility to be well educated and well read and up to date on the issues that we are facing. If we take the UNESCO vote as an example, I think many Christians woke up in the middle of the night and they realized that someone was breaking into the house and they started shooting in all directions. That's not always the most fruitful and productive response to helping Israel. So I believe that we need consistently to follow the issues, make sure that we have the talking points, make sure that we are active. It doesn't help much if we, by waving an Israeli flag or singing an Israeli song or dancing, we have to be more practical than this and pragmatic. And this is what we're trying to do. And we had this conference, as you know, in London on Saturday when we brought together hundreds of friends of Israel, and we told them the same message. Listen, you need to be a practical, pragmatic friend of Israel. This means picking up the phone, speaking with your member of parliament, writing a letter, expressing yourself, not only when you're in a safe haven like we so often are, but also among people that may disagree with us. And I agree with the ambassador. I think that Israel has many, many, many more friends in Israel than we can imagine. But this is a silent majority. Those who hate Israel are a very loud crowd, but they're a very small minority. Now we need to make this silent majority a vocal majority.
Yeah, and Hannu, I mean, you are one of the leading members of the European Parliament here in this Parliament that are really standing up and supporting Israel. How can we build stronger relations between the European Parliament and the State of Israel?
I think the main issue is that we have to underline our values. We have the same values. And if we are faithful to our values, democracy, human rights, freedom, express, rule of law, so then we have a very strong relationship, and we have to remember that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East and only country in the Middle East which share the same European values. So I think that that's a good basis for our relationship, and we have to underline that, and we have to remember that also when we make decisions.
Yeah, and Ambassador Roni, I have to ask you. Want to thank you so much for being our guest on the program today, and we want to just talk about our love and our commitment for Israel and the Jewish people, and that you're not alone, and that all of us here will stand with Israel and will stand with the Jewish people and will advocate Israel's cause, and we'll reaffirm our commitment and our support to the State of Israel. But do you have a message for our Christian viewers who love Israel and want to stand with Israel?
My message is very simple. First, we don't take it for granted. It's not easy to be a friend of Israel. It's challenging, but it's also a privilege. And one good thing about my job here and my previous job as ambassador to the UN in Geneva is that you can immediately identify who is a real friend of Israel and who just portrays to be a friend but is not a real friend, because we can test that friendship. And I know Tomas, and we tested him, and he's a good friend of Israel. We need your support. We appreciate it. And as Tomas said, the message should come from bottom up, from the people who really love Israel and support Israel, to tell their governments, the members of parliament, that Israel is important, that Israel is an ally, that Israel will listen to its friends. And if you want us to listen to you, then prove to us that you are our friends, and you've proven to us that you are our friends. Thank you for that.
Gentlemen, thank you for the programme. And I just want to thank all of you watching today's programme from the European Parliament here in Brussels. And we have an exclusive interview here with Israel's new ambassador to the European Union. And we can support him, and we can support the State of Israel by continuing to be vocal, by writing to our political representatives on the righteousness of Israel's cause. So we thank you for watching this special edition of the European Report.